Hey everybody, how are you doing, writers? It's Sonia here again. Throughout this module, you've been learning about Writing Workshop, and hopefully, you've got a sense that this is an approach that can really benefit students, that can really engage students, where students are spending a lot of time writing and where you are really thinking closely about what they need to learn and supporting students through conferences and mini lessons and celebrating writing, right? So you've heard a lot of good things about Writers Workshop, and when I first used this approach, when I first heard about it, I was really excited because it really changed the way that I taught writing. And I want to be clear, this is not an easier way to teach writing. It would be much easier to put a prompt up on the board and get students to write, or get them doing writing worksheets or timed writing. So it's not an easier way to teach writing. But it does have a lot of advantages. But I want to address some of the criticisms that you might encounter with Writing Workshop, some of which I believe can be addressed quite easily and are actually misconceptions of Writing Workshop, and some of which I think we need to take a lot more seriously. So, first of all, some people criticize Writing Workshop because they think it's really wishy-washy. Like they think that you should be focusing on skills and strategies, and the workshop is just too vague. Children just sitting around writing, and it's this kind of idealized vision of writing. And I really like to say that criticism is when people are not really attending to what's important about Writing Workshop. So I believe that you do intentionally teach skills and strategies very, very thoughtfully in Writing Workshop. So those mini lessons and those conferences, you're really engaged in teaching. And what's more, you are teaching those skills and strategies as part of the writing process and as students are writing, which research shows is much more powerful than teaching grammar or teaching spelling or teaching all those things in isolation away from writing. So I think that one can be addressed quite easily, that criticism. I've also heard people say that, it's, works for younger students, but it wouldn't be so good for older students. I have used Writing Workshop, right from with kindergarten to college students, and I think it works well with all students because you're kind of getting to know your students, meeting them where they are at, and of course, you're going to adapt things depending on the age group, but I think the general structure of Writing Workshop works well with any student. I've also heard people say, well, this would work well with typically developing students, but students who have special needs, a workshop approach is not going to work for them. Again, I would adamantly disagree with that. Of course, if you have students that have particular needs, those need to be addressed, and you're going to need to provide different scaffoldings and supports depending on your students. However, I think, from a democratic point of view, from an equity point of view, all students deserve access to meaningful texts and to meaningful writing for them. And my daughter, who is in middle school right now, in junior high, in a self-contained special education classroom, her teacher uses a workshop approach, and my daughter uses her augmentative communication device, and other children have different scaffolds and accommodations and supports. But they all get to write about topics that are personally meaningful to them, and that's really important for all students. And they all get to share their writing and comment on each other's writing in whatever way that they can, and they have a writing community. So again, I disagree with that criticism of writing workshop. If you as a teacher know your students and know their interests and know what supports they need, it works with any group of students. There is something in that flexibility in the structure that's really powerful. Another criticism is that students only write about things like their friends and their pets and popular culture kind of stories, and people see that as a criticism. One, I think, it's really important that students get to draw on their own interests, but also I think that is partly our fault as teachers if we're not introducing them to other ways to come up with ideas for writing. And you'll remember I talked about sort of the heart map and then that urgency of the pen idea. So sometimes it's about the kinds of approaches that we use, and then the kinds of texts that we share in the classroom. So if you're sharing a lot of texts that show children that writing is about taking action and writing for issues that you feel are unfair, like writing to try and change the world. If you're showing children writing that does that, then and giving them opportunities to do that kind of writing, then I think it changes the topics they write about and the ways they write and the different forms of writing. So again, I think that's something for us to think about. Now, a much more serious criticism, something that to me is much more problematic about writing workshop, is that in general, the writing workshop, and particularly when it becomes a program that has been placed in a school that teachers are following rather than learning about their students, that can be really problematic, because what tends to happen in curriculum, which is part of our bigger problem in society, is writing workshop tends to center whiteness. It tends to center white mainstream English, and it tends to center sort of white norms in schools. And why is this such a big problem, right? This is such a big problem because we have linguistically, culturally, racially diverse students in our classrooms, and we are disadvantaging those students if we center white practices. So more recently, many people have really critiqued writing workshop for this. And if we look at writing workshop, a lot of the original architects were white, and they followed white norms as they've created curriculum for writing workshop. And this is really, really problematic. And I, hand on heart, have to acknowledge that as a teacher, it may be unintentionally, but I've engaged in racist practices because I've disadvantaged racist and biased practices because I've disadvantaged my students that are culturally, linguistically, racially diverse or diverse in any other way, because this curriculum is very much based on white norms. And so I think that's something that we really need to pay attention to. And that doesn't, I still think writing workshop is a really, really valuable approach. But as you will hear me talk in the rest of this course, we have to start with our students, right? And we have to examine our own practices and biases and beliefs and experiences. We have to really examine those, and we have to really reflect on who our students are and who our broader community and the country that we live in, this diverse and beautifully diverse country, right? And to think really, really carefully about changing our practices to ensure that we are working in anti-racist and anti-biased ways. So I'm only just going to give you some sort of highlights about some of the things that are important to do within the writing workshop or within your broader approaches to teaching. So, of course, the idea of centering diverse texts, diverse books and diverse materials in your classroom, and centering those authors and showing students the faces of those authors and letting them hear their voices too. So that all children, that mirror and window idea, children get to see texts by a lot of different authors and in different dialects and languages, and show that we're really valuing diverse voices in our classroom. And also, you'll see in this course the idea of centering diverse scholars. So there are many scholars of critical literacy that have taken on a workshop approach, but shown us different ways to do that in anti-racist ways. So you'll see kind of the voices and faces of diverse scholars in this course. And then I think another important thing for writing is centering writing not just as a school activity, right? Writing isn't just a school thing, but centering writing for personal agency, for taking action, as a tool for social justice, and really showing the diversity of writing and its purposes, writing for advocacy and justice. So maybe self-advocacy and also advocacy for big issues that we really, really care about and we want to see change. So that was just a few things that I wanted to say about Writing Workshop, because you've heard a lot of good things about it in this course so far, in this module. But I want you to be aware of these criticisms of Writing Workshop, and to be aware as educators, we are always trying to improve our practices. And I still have a lot to learn about writing pedagogy, and particularly about ensuring that the ways that I teach are not disadvantaging that any of my students, and are really empowering my students, all of my students. So lots to think about there, and I invite you to dig deeper into these issues in this course, and to keep thinking about these issues throughout your teaching career. Thank you.